Recently, I have been studying the work of Rudolf Steiner and Dr. Robert Gilbert. I listened to one of Dr. Gilbert's lectures and found it rather interesting. He was saying that we're surrounded by non-physical beings that are communicating with us at all times. If you're not fully conscious at the energy centers above the head, you won't be able to receive highly compressed information in the way that high angelic beings communicate with each other. Most humans haven't developed the ability to communicate with these non-physical beings. Some humans have, and it's possible for you to learn this ability as well. Perhaps you've been swept up in a high impulse of inspiration before. I'm buying this house, I'm starting this business. You didn't really think it through, you don't know why you did it, you just felt like you had to. But now what? According to Dr. Gilbert, this is usually a sign that a spiritual impulse went straight into your will and was not able to be received fully consciously at the higher centers. When spiritual messages aren't understood consciously, those messages turn to impulses that then go into other areas of the body and in some cases take on pathological forms. At this particular time in human development, there is a spiritual imperative to become fully conscious of these spiritual beings. Unconscious ignorance will manifest in the world through pathological patterns. There is an initiation phase on every spiritual path. It's an awakening process where a person begins to realize that they are a spiritual being having a human experience. Their eyes are opening to the spiritual world. The center column of energy in the human energy body is waking up. This was classically referred to as the column of glory, which goes back to the Persian Manichaeism tradition, Taoism, and some of the early Egyptian Coptics. Once you become aware of this column and are able to put your consciousness directly into specific energy centers, particularly the crown, the region just above the head, it becomes much easier to perceive the non-physical beings directly, as well as receiving packed thought forms, which are highly concentrated information that we receive as a totality. Meditation develops your energy centers. There are two types of meditation, receptive and active. The problem is that most traditions only teach one or the other. You're either taught an emptiness meditation like Zen or Vipassana or transcendental meditation, or you're taught a type of active meditation like creative visualization. These are two different mind powers. Both are equally important. Emptying the mind allows you to perceive what's empirically in front of you. You're able to perceive spiritual truths without contaminating them with your own projections. The other side is also essential because it allows us to take action with this mind power. It allows us to craft and create things with mind power. These two types of meditation done together are essential. The non-physical beings that are in constant communication with you are called elementals or thought forms, egregores, angels, demons. There are thought forms like the very high-ranking Archangel Raphael meaning the healing of God, that have been around for thousands of years, but new thought forms get created every single day. I create new thought forms every single day. You create new thought forms every single day. As humans, one way we do this is through our third eye center. Terms like being born from the brow of Zeus is a symbolic illustration for the manifestation of a new thought form. Every human is doing this. The only question is whether you know you're doing it or not. Your self-generated thought forms affect you and the people around you. Negative thought forms have a harmful effect on yourself and others. If you've ever been in a relationship with someone who's constantly generating negative thought forms, you may remember how that made you feel like shit also. If you walk into a room where two people were just fighting, you feel it. People who repeatedly generate negative thought forms develop patterns. In modern psychology, these patterns are referred to as neurosis or psychological complexes. But esoteric traditions have known about these for thousands of years. Elemental beings generated from repetitious negative thinking that manifest into pathological patterns. Demons. Continuing on with the work of Dr. Robert Gilbert, there are 3 stages of spiritual development. The first stage is differentiating your conscious self from your reactive self. This is the start of any modern self-help work, recognizing when you're conscious and acting out of free will versus being triggered and falling into a reactive mind state. It's very easy to sleepwalk through life. Knowing there's a difference between your higher self and your pathological patterns is the first step. You must wake up, which leads to the second stage of self-awareness, self-observation and self-remembering, differentiating your conscious thoughts from external forces. You begin to catch yourself when you're not acting consciously. You're not as easily triggered by someone's tone of voice, and the environment around you doesn't lead to animalistic reactions. You begin to see that obsessive memory for what it is, and you're choosing not to let it ruin your day anymore. This is known by the modern world as basic self-help psychology, taking responsibility for your thoughts, words, and actions. When someone throws you shade, you can have the animalistic reaction of throwing shade back, and it'll just be two animals going at each other. Or you can take the fully conscious approach, think about what's really happening, and respond in a much higher and more skilled manner. The third stage of spiritual development is learning to discern the essential nature of the spiritual beings that are currently affecting your inner soul life. Some spirits are wonderful guides, others may not be so reliable. In the work of St. Paul in the New Testament, he says that one must test the spirits, because not every spiritual being that approaches you may necessarily be giving you a beneficial impulse. Now that you've learned to differentiate your thoughts from the thoughts of external forces, you must now seek to understand the nature of those unseen external forces. And unseen forces aren't necessarily good or bad. One of the problems in modern metaphysics is that we lost one of the old keys, which is that you need a minimum threefold differentiation of spiritual beings. It got simplified down into a twofold differentiation of good beings and bad beings. Good beings are light, bad beings are dark. That's not enough to differentiate. People are often approached by magnificent forces of light, but it doesn't mean they're quote-unquote good. It may not be an all-knowing spirit or one that has an agenda you'd want to sign on to. So we must change the good-bad dichotomy into something that has to do with balance. In the Jewish Kabbalistic tradition, you have the tree of life. There's a middle pillar, the only pillar that goes from the top, Kether or crown, all the way down to the bottom, Malkuth, earth. Watch my video on the middle pillar to learn one of these esoteric rituals. Then there's two side pillars. They don't go all the way up and down. One is the pillar of mercy, the other is the pillar of severity. Two opposite polarities, but the balance is in the center. In Buddhism, the path is always the middle way. You can never achieve anything beneficial by being on one extreme or the other. So there's going to be beings of two opposite polarities. There are beings of tremendous light, but the light is blinding and distorting. It's leading to states of spiritual illusion, not direct spiritual realities. The other side, the dark side, are beings connected with matter who try to make us believe that spirit doesn't even exist, or try to give us forms of spirituality that basically become black magic. The manipulation of spiritual forces that other people don't understand, so you can manipulate people for your own pleasure or self-aggrandizement. These two polarities are also shown in Christianity with the two thieves that were crucified on either side of Christ. One turns towards the Christ and says, "Take me with you to your Father's kingdom," mercy. The other turns to Christ and rebukes him, severity. One of the only modern forms of spiritual teaching that clearly represents this polarity comes from the work of Rudolf Steiner. He makes this very clear and uses classical terms. The unbalanced polarity towards the spiritual side is referred to as Luciferic, because Lucifer means light bearer. The other side is referred to as Ahrimanic, because Aram Engra Menu was a term for a dark being of the earth and materiality that pulled people's consciousness downward. In the Persian Zoroastrian tradition, after the Zoroastrians, it became the concept of Set in the Egyptian traditions. When the Hebrews left Egypt and started what is now modern Judaism, the concept of Set became Ha-Satan. Ha-Satan means the adversary, which became our concept of Satan. Lucifer and Satan classically represented two diametrically opposed spiritual beings and forces. In Protestant Christianity, they completely mix Satan and Lucifer into the same thing. How can Lucifer, a beautiful bearer of light, also be this dark and horrible creature at the center of earth breathing hellfire? things got mixed up and we lost the capacity for differentiation. So now, people who have a simple twofold dichotomy will very commonly accept great beings of light as their guides and not discern that they're actually being more of a Luciferic nature. And it's a given on any spiritual path that both types of beings will be connecting to us and influencing us at all times. This happens to everybody. Luciferic beings give us all these great gifts. Art, music, literature, but if we do nothing but follow their impulses, you're going to end up as either a heroin addict or end up with forms of spirituality that are completely illusory, and you'll be unable to pay your taxes, and you won't get to work on time. You won't be grounded because these Luciferic beings are constantly pulling you away with the wind. With the Ahrimanic beings, you'll pay your taxes, you'll get to work on time, you'll have all the materials you want, but you'll lose real spirituality, and all your spiritual knowledge will go to manipulating other people. These two forces have to be distinguished from the beings of the center. It's the middle pillar in Kabbalah. It's the center of the cross where the Christ's body hung in Christianity. It's the middle way in Buddhism. It's about balancing the polarities with the center. At the start of any spiritual path, Luciferic beings will approach you strongly. We're all connected to Luciferic beings. The first thing they do is pump up your ego. They tell you, oh, now you're starting to remember. You're this incredible spiritual being. In fact, you're a spiritual master. They inflate your ego, and if you're not careful, they'll get you to think you're much more advanced than you really are. This is a natural challenge on the path, and it happens to everybody. Classically, people knew this was going to be one of the phases on the journey. These have been the teachings from the work of Dr. Robert Gilbert, out of the mouth of me, Josh Clausen. Thank you, Daily Motivation, for introducing me to Dr. Gilbert's work. For everyone who watched and listened, thank you for your time and presence.